Good morning. Welcome to another live broadcast of Coffee and Propaganda. I'm Duncan King. In this episode, we are finishing up the Genesis to Deuteronomy section in the carm.org website. Continuing our exploration, not into the website, but into the issues in Leviticus to Deuteronomy that Matt Slick, the administrator of the website and the author of most of the articles on the website, did not mention. And before I do that, and carm.org, by the way, is called Christian Apologetics Research Ministry. And it's a website that offers apologetics, which are defenses of the Bible. Before I go into that, I have my old Bible here that I used at a very interesting time in my life. And it was a time when I was still a Christian, but I was what I would call a non-biblical Christian. So what I believed at that point in my life, I was about 24, 25 years old, and I believed that although Jesus was real and Christianity was true, the Bible wasn't necessarily reliable. So I thought parts of it must have been reliable and other parts of it weren't. And so what I did at that point in my life, I decided to read the Torah. And, well, not just the Torah, I was going to read the whole thing, but I stopped at the Torah, then I read the rest of the Bible later on in my life. And I found some really interesting things when I read it at that point. Obviously, I had exposure to the Bible as a Christian school kid and as the grandson of two Baptist ministers. But, over that course of time, I memorized so many Bible verses going to Christian school and a Christian camp and to church, etc. But I never sat down and just read it. Usually what Christians will do when they try to give you, when you want to read the whole Bible, they will give you a list of passages that cause you to jump all over the place in the Bible. So they'll give you like a passage in the Torah, and then a passage in Psalms, and then another passage in the Torah, and then a passage in the Gospels that will kind of lead you to try to draw connections that the authors themselves aren't trying to make. And at that point in my life, I was open to the idea that certain passages in the Bible were absolutely inspired and other ones weren't. So it's a very interesting time in my life to read the Torah because my mind was wide open. Anything could have convinced me either way. And reading it from just Genesis to Deuteronomy was very eye-opening when I wasn't reading it by having some minister tell me what it all meant or what this implies or what that implies. I was just reading it with an open mind. And it's not a situation, not very many people are in a state of mind to do that. And I was in that state of mind at the time. And I went through my notes here. While I was doing this, I was making notes along the way, lots of notes. So I'm circling things that I found interesting. Not just critical things, but just interesting. Some of them I found I liked, and some of them I didn't like. And some of them I found pretty surprising. What surprised me as I was going through it was not so much what it said, the Torah, but what it didn't say was most shocking to me. I'm reading through it, raised in a Christian school kid. My father was a teacher at the Christian school. Both of my grandfathers were Baptist ministers. I attended some 5,000 sermons by the age of 16. So I'm reading through it, and there's all these notes in here where I'm sitting here waiting for the devil to show up. Where's the mention of Satan? I keep saying to myself in these notes here. There's a mention of the serpent in the book of Genesis, and it seems to be the only mention of any kind of evil being. There's not even a mention of demons in here. God's talking directly to the Israelites in most of this, and to the patriarchs, and to Adam and Eve, but he never mentions any demons or Satan. I'm like, when's Satan going to come up here? Because I was always told as a child that the whole Bible is one consistent message, but there's no mention of Satan here. Here's what it says about the serpent. Where is it? So God, Lord said to the serpent, because you have done this, cursed are you above all livestock. The devil's not livestock. And all the wild animals, the devil's not a wild animal. You will crawl on your belly and you will eat dust all the days of your life. The devil doesn't have days of his life. He's an immortal being. And I'll put enmity between you and the woman, and between your offspring and hers, which just means that everybody's going to hate snakes forever. He will crush your head and you will strike his heel. You know, people step on snakes and snakes bite people in the heel as they're walking through the tall grass. So he's talking obviously about a snake. And then as I'm exploring, I keep looking for this reference to Satan, and there just isn't one. Another thing that surprised me as I was reading it about what it didn't say was I'm looking for a reference to the afterlife somewhere here. I mean, there's all these commandments from God. God's commanding patriarchs to do this. He's commanding Moses to do this and that. He never promises any of them that they're going to go to heaven. And I found that really surprising too. Here's a statement I make. Okay, Deuteronomy here, we go through the 10 Commandments, and I make a reference here. At this point, I'm really just shocked that there's no mention of an afterlife. And I write here 10 Commandments. More evidence here the Israelites not believe in an afterlife. And after this, we go into the promises that you will get if you follow the 10 Commandments. Do what is right and good in the Lord's sight, so that it may go well with you, and you may go in and take over the good land that the Lord promised on oath to your forefathers, thrusting out all your enemies before you, as the Lord said. And the Lord commanded us to obey all these decrees and fear the Lord our God, so that we might always prosper and be kept alive, as is the case today. If you pay attention to these laws and careful to follow them, the Lord God will keep his covenant of love with you. As he swore to your forefathers, he would love you and bless you and increase your numbers. He will bless the fruit of your womb, the crops of your land, your grain, new wine and oil, the calves of your herds and lambs of your flocks, and the land that he swore your forefathers to give you. You'll be more blessed than any other people. None of your men or women will be childless, nor any of your livestock without young. The Lord will keep you free from every disease. I mean, it goes on and on. There's just all these lists of if you follow the commands, I'll do this. If you don't follow the commands, I'll do that. And never a mention of heaven or hell. Not a single one. And that really shocked me as I was reading this. Moses, more instructions and promises. It just goes on and on without a mention of heaven or hell. And there's not even a mention that any patriarch, anyone that dies in the Torah, goes to heaven or hell. Not a single thing. Yeah, another note I gave, more promises and curses, none mentioning an afterlife. I'm sitting here and I'm reading through this, just looking, when are they going to mention anyone having an afterlife? And that really just amazed me. Another note here, a prediction about Israelites returning to Lord and prospering. Still no mention of an afterlife. And it just really shocked me as I was reading it. So I want to share that with you first about just that impression I got. And what I've learned is that these elements of the religion, for one thing, the afterlife is an idea that Jews have, but they just did not have it at that time when the Torah was being written. And the Torah really is the basis, the building blocks for the whole rest of the text. Before that was written, there was not even a concept of having scripture or whatever. So everything else in the Bible is built off the Torah. And when you realize that at one time, the Torah was all there was for Bible-believing people. The other books came later. And so you got to realize that this was the only book they had at the time that was supposed to be a testament to their faith. And you would think that if they believed in an afterlife, that they would have mentioned it somewhere. If they believed in evil beings, they would have mentioned them somewhere. And there's not a single solitary mention of any of that stuff in the Torah. It just really shocked me. And I've come to learn also that in the entire Old Testament, the entire Hebrew Bible, going all the way to, what's the last book? Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, Joshua, Judges, Ruth, 1st, 2nd Samuel, 1st, 2nd Kings, 1st, 2nd Chronicles. Malachi, I think is the last one, if I'm not mistaken. I think it's Malachi. They still don't mention any evil Satan being. I mean, Satan's in Job, but he's actually an emissary of God. And Jews, if you look in their website, will talk about Satan and they'll say what they believe about Satan is the adversary angel. So he's put on earth, or Satans, which means are just Satan means well, it can mean the opposer, but it also means just an obstacle that you face in life. And so what they believe is that Satan is, or Satan, or what is it called? Hail Satan, the angelic being that Job confronts, is an angel that does the will of God by giving us obstacles to make us rise to the occasion or make us stronger. And it's just it was just absolutely shocking to me that I could not find any mention of him in the Torah. Boy, that was surprising. And also no mention of the afterlife. It was just, I was always told that it was just a Christian document all the way through. Anyway, I am talking way too long, and I got to try to get this video done by noon because I got to pick up my son from school because he's having half day today. So let's go into some of the other problems and that I have listed here. First, we're going to talk about, before I actually go into the problems, though, I'm going to talk about some criticisms that are bad criticisms of the Torah. If you've gone through this video so far, there are some atheists who are going to say, well, why don't you bring up the issue of the corn? And why didn't you bring up the issue of the unicorns? And why don't you bring up the issue of, what's the third one? An eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. I'm going to go into those really briefly here. I actually think that those criticisms of the Torah are bad criticisms. And I'll explain to you why. When it comes to unicorns, we'll look here at the passages that mention the unicorns. As you can see, there's several, and they're King James Version passages. So Daniel mentions them. Numbers, which is a Torah book, mentions the unicorn here. You got Numbers, unicorn. Deuteronomy, mention of unicorns. And they're mentioned in all kinds of different contexts and situations. Unicorns. And a lot of atheists will say, well, that is evidence that the Bible is a fairy tale because obviously mythicorns are mythical beasts. And so how could they have been encountering unicorns? There are a lot of other good criticisms of the Bible that proves that it's a mythology. That doesn't happen to be one of them, and I'll explain why. The term unicorn, as it was used by the King James authors, did not mean what it means today in English. In this, what I'm going to link here is a Webster's Dictionary from 1828. And it'll show how that word was defined at the time that it was written. The King James authors did not write the King James Version 1828, far before this. But this just shows the state of that word at that time and the times before that when the King James Version was written. So this is what the 1828 dictionary, Webster's Dictionary, says. Unicorn is an animal with one horn, a monoceros. This name is often applied to the rhinoceros. The sea unicorn is a fish of the whale kind called the narwhal, remarkable for its horn growing out of its nose. It says it's a fowl. Fossil unicorn or fossil unicorn's horn, a substance used in medicine, a terrene crustaceous spar. The term that they're translating here as unicorn from the Torah, from the Hebrew Bible, is, I think there's a mention of it in Wikipedia. And I have to look at that really quick. I was criticized recently by somebody for using Wikipedia for a source. I'm actually not using it for a source. Wikipedia is a compilation of sources, and it shows where its actual sources are on the bottom of the page. And if you contest anything in Wikipedia, you can just look up that. But anyway, and it often will even say when people contest something. When you're talking about a Bible thing, everybody's going to contest it. But anyway, the word is the riem. that the King James authors translated as unicorn. And it's the wild, untangible animal, great strength and agility with mighty horn or horns. Best fit the aurochs. This view is supported by the Assyrian Rimu. It's often used as a metaphor of strength and is depicted as powerful, fierce wild mountain bull with large horns. This animal was also depicted in ancient Mesopotamian art and profile with only one horn visible. So often they would show this animal in the side profile here, and you just see the one horn, but it actually was a two-horned animal. And this is an auroch. And a lot of the other translators, like the NIV and the better translation, the NET will translate that word as some kind of cow or some kind of oxen. So that's a bad criticism, bringing up the unicorns. An eye for an eye. This is also often referenced in a negative light. When people say, well, then eye for eye, tooth for tooth, that's just about, we believe in peace. We don't believe in extracting vengeance upon people. So I'm against eye for an eye. The passage specifically says, if you do and they cry out to me, I will certainly hear their cry, and my anger will be aroused, and I will kill you with the sword. Your wives will become widows, and your children fatherless. If you lend money to one of my people among you is not needy. What the fuck's going on here? I put the wrong passage in here. I don't know. I'll just type it in. Eye for eye Bible. Exodus. There you go. 21:24. I don't know how I ended up on that wrong passage, but if there is any further injury, then you should appoint as a penalty for life, eye for eye, tooth for tooth, hand for hand, foot for foot, burn for burn, wound for wound, bruise for bruise. This is not telling you to kick someone's ass if they piss you off, or to always extract revenge on anybody that pisses you off. This is about law here, which is different than telling you to take the law into your own hands when somebody bothers you. And what this, if you take this out of context of any historical context, you're interpreting it wrong. And I learned what this really means from Christine Hayes, who is the Bible historian. You can look at her videos of her lectures on Yale. I believe it's the Yale channel in YouTube, which has a lot of great lectures from Yale University. And this is from the Code of Hammurabi, is what this is actually debunking. So we're looking at the Code of Hammurabi. We don't know that the authors of the Torah read the Code of Hammurabi, but it is representative of ancient Near East laws. And if you read through the Code of Hammurabi, there's a lot of references about taking people's eyes out or cutting their hands off for theft and things like that had nothing to do with theft. So what the Exodus passage is saying is that if you do something to someone, you can only take their eye if they harm your eye, or their tooth if they knock your tooth out, or your hand if they knock your hand out. So it's about having a fair punishment. The punishment fits the crime. Burn for burn, wound for wound, bruise for bruise. So it's actually kind of a just concept. It's not actually about vengeance. So that's an unfair criticism when we bring that up, saying that, well, the Old Testament's all about you go around and get vengeance on people. There is passages that do imply that, but that particular passage actually isn't. You're taking it out of context of the historical meaning of it when you interpret it that way. Another passage is the corn. And this is a little bit of a weird one. Usually I only hear this criticism from crazy people. And in our camp, we do have some crazy conspiratorial sorts of atheists who believe the Bible was made up like within 500 years ago. I mean, and you can find so much evidence that isn't the case. The Torah was written in about 600 BCE. It wasn't written after Columbus came. So he always references corn, and they'll say, corn in the Bible. This is proof. See, the issue with corn is that we didn't discover corn in the West until after Columbus came to America, and we got corn from the Native Americans. So before then, in the Eastern world, the Eastern world, the old world, no one knew about corn, which is what we would, we call that maize. So that's the, corn on the cob, the stuff you buy in the can, like cream corn or whatever. This is a word that used to mean something else. It's a totally unfair criticism. And I got this link here from a site called pt9.com. So totally unbiased source. It's not dealing with the Bible at all or biblical criticism. This is just about a food. So it's just talking about the history of foods here. And I'm not going to show you the website because the website has a lot of pop-ups. So I'm not going to show it to you, but this is a link that comes from pt9.com. What made us call it corn? The more technical name for the big green stalk, maize, came to English from the Spanish maíz, a barely altered version of the Taino, the language native to Hispaniola, the island of Haiti, and the Dominican Republic. Word for the plant maíz, prehistory of the Proto-Indian European. Both grain and corn come from the same very old pie word. I can't remember. I'm not gonna really understand what that means, pie word. Anyway, there are two options for what that might be. Either jur, meaning worn down, or ger, meaning mature. They're talking about the etymology of the word. That stem wound up through Latin, on the other hand, which kept the G and gave us today's grain, and through the Germanic languages, which what English comes from is Germanic language, which in their no-nonsense way turned the G into a K and gave us corn. That conflation of grain and corn gets at a whole nother facet of the corn's past too. Back in the day, English speakers used to use corn to refer to any grain they felt like, though it usually meant the predominant crop in a given region. In England, what wheat was corn, while oats were corn in Scotland and Ireland, and even rice was the only corn that grows in the inland of Batavia, aka the Indonesian isle of Java, as described in a 1767 travelogue. So that's a reference to an actual written document that mentions corn as being oats or whatever in this one place. What we call just plain corn today started out as Indian corn, but we dropped the qualifier by the early 1800s. Today, Americans, Canadians, and Australians are still the only Anglophones who called stuff on the cob corn. Everybody else calls it maize. So the reference to the corn, well, oh my goodness, it says corn, so that means that they made up the Bible in 1600 AD. It's a totally nonsense criticism. It's just a word that used to just mean any kind of grain, and at a certain point we started to use it just for this Indian corn, which is maize. So let's go to some criticisms now. Those are just, bad criticism I want to point out in case anyone's watching this and they're like, well, why didn't you bring up the corn? Why didn't you bring up the eye for an eye? Why didn't you bring up the unicorns? I'm just getting those out of the way. I'm not bringing them up because they're bad criticisms. Well, I brought them up just to point out that they're bad criticisms. So here's a good criticism. Test for an unfaithful wife. We find this in Numbers 5:11 through 17. Which says, and the Lord spake unto Moses, saying, speak unto the children of Israel, and say to them, if any man's wife go aside and commit a trespass against him, and a man lie with her carnally, and it be hid from the eyes of her husband, and he be kept close, and she be defiled, and there be no witness against her, neither she be taken with the manner, and the spirit of jealousy come upon him, meaning the husband, and he be jealous of his wife, and she be defiled, or if the spirit of jealousy come upon him, and he be jealous of his wife, and she be not defiled, then shall the man bring his wife unto the priest, and he shall bring her offering for her, the 10th part of an ephah of barley meal. He shall pour no oil upon it, nor put frankincense thereon, for it is an offering of jealousy, an offering of memorial. bringing iniquity to remembrance. And the priest shall bring her near and set her before the Lord. And the priest shall take the holy water in the earthen vessel and the dust that is on the floor. So he's going to pick up dust from the tabernacle floor. That the priest shall take and put it into the water. Is there more here? Oh, there's more here. Let's go into 25. I didn't list that properly. That was 19. And the priest shall bring home by oath unto the woman, no man have lain with thee, and if thou hast gone to uncleanness with her husband, be thou free of this bitter water that causeth the curse. And the priest shall charge a woman with the oath of cursing, and the priest shall say to the woman, the Lord maketh thee a curse and an oath upon thy people, and the Lord doth make thy thigh to rot and thy belly to swell. And this water that causeth the curse shall go into thy bowels, to make thy belly to swell and thy thigh to rot. And the woman shall say, Amen, amen. And the priest shall write these curses on a book out with the bitter water. And he shall cause the woman to drink the bitter water that causeth the curse. And the water that causeth the curse shall enter into her and become bitter. So what he's done here is he's taken this jar here, this bowl of water, and he's taken dust from the dirt, basically dirt from the floor of the tabernacle. And he's written his accusations against her on a piece of parchment. And what they used, and then he's taken that and he's blotted that and put that ink into the actual cup. And he's making her drink that. And if she doesn't get sick from it, then I guess she's fine. What he's basically doing here is he's poisoning her. Let's look at what they used for ink back then. You have a link here. Pigments and inks typically used on papyrus. This is the third blog post. Okay. Two most common pigments seen on papyrus are black and red. The black ink you see most often is used for writing the letters of the hieroglyphs or hieratic text and almost always contain carbon black ink. The ink is made from burning organic materials such as wood or oil, and then pulverizing the material before mixing with water. So they take wood or they burn the wood and basically make it into coal and then grind it and smash it into little pieces. And they mix it with a binder, usually probably a plant gum from the Cadia tree family. So what this basically is that they're making here, that they make their ink out of, is basically activated charcoal, which has a medical use. You give it to people that have been poisoned. And as I was training as an EMT, I was told how to use this. Basically, you give it to a person who swallowed some kind of poison, usually when they're trying to poison themselves, like from a suicide. It basically makes them puke. It causes them total stomach pain. They gag, they puke, and then all the whatever they swallowed, they puke it on the floor and they get rid of it. And that actually usually, will save their life in a lot of instances if they swallowed some kind of horrible poison, like, bleach or whatever the hell they're using it to poison themselves. Here's what it says here. Do not use activated charcoal as a supplement if you take these medications. Let's see what it says here. If this is a bad link. Activated charcoal may reduce or prevent the absorption of certain drugs. Well, it doesn't go in here, but it causes horrible stomach and gagging. I mean, it just side effects are more likely to be used on a long-term basis. Taking mouth activated charcoal can cause black stools, black tongue, vomiting or diarrhea, constipation. So he's taken this. He's basically given her activated charcoal, which is what the ink is made out of. And he's taken a bunch of dirt on the floor and put it in a cup and handed it to her and made her swallow it in this passage here. And then if she don't throw up, this means that she's or have stomach pains from this. And this proves that she's innocent of what her husband accused her of. So he basically poisoned the woman with this stuff that's supposed to make you gag. So that's a pretty ridiculous passage. We talked a lot about in the previous videos. Matt Slick actually did bring up a lot of criticisms about the taking women as slaves as they did in a lot of the times they were going to war. This is an actual passage that actually tells them what that's about. Let's go put my cup down, coffee and bullshit, and I can't hold my coffee cup. Deuteronomy. Okay. Now cometh nigh to a city to fight against it, then proclaim peace unto it, and it shall be, and if it make the answer of peace and open unto thee, then it shall be. And all the people that is found therein shall be tributaries unto thee, and shall serve thee. Got a lot of these there. And if it make no peace with thee, and it will make war against thee, then thou shalt besiege it. But when the Lord thy God hath delivered into thy hands, thou shalt smite every male thereof with the edge of the sword. This is just kind of just a sort of a I don't know what you would call that. It's just sort of just telling them kind of a stock weighted to deal with any country. But the women and the little ones and the cattle and all that's in the city, even the spoil thereof, thou shalt take unto thyself, shall eat the spoil of thy enemies, which the Lord God gave thee. Thou shalt do unto all cities which are far off from thee, which are not of the cities of these nations. This is a bad translation, King James Version. Let me go to what the NET or the NIV specifically says. And it specifically calls that plunder. Translating from the Hebrew there. Why can't I find the NIV? There we go. The word here they use is plunder. He's calling women and children plunder here. So that's pretty bad. God is prejudicial against people with deformities. A lot of passages like this in the books of Leviticus and Numbers. I think this was a pretty good list here. Leviticus 21, 16 through 23. The Lord said to Moses, say to Aaron, for the generations to come, none of your descendants who has any defect may come near to offer the food of his God. No man who has any defect may come near. No man who is blind or lame, disfigured or deformed. No man is crippled with a crippled foot or hand, who is a hunchback or a dwarf, who has any eye defect, who has festering or running sores or damaged testicles. No descendant of Aaron the priest who has any defect has come near to present the food offerings to the Lord. He has a defect. He must not come near to offer the food of his God. He may eat the most holy food of his God as well as the holy food. Yet, because of his defect, he must not go to the curtain or approach the altar and so desecrate my sanctuary. I am the Lord who makes them holy. Not a very tolerant God. The idea that God loves everyone, not expressed there very well. Obviously, God thinks that, at least the God of the Torah, seems to think that some people are better than other people. People with deformities, blind people, doesn't love them the same as he loves the rest of us. I guess we're better than them, according to the God of the Torah. The Lord said to Moses, command the Israelites to send away from the camp anyone who has a defiling skin disease or discharge of any kind, or who is ceremonially unclean because of a dead body. Send away male and female alike. Send them outside the camp so they will not defile their camp where I dwell among them. The Israelites did so. So they sent all these deformed people, these people with disabilities, set them outside the camp. They just said the Lord has instructed Moses. That's pretty cruel. Let's go to Deuteronomy 23, 1 through 2. A lot of passages like this, where they are commanding the Israelites to be cruel to people that are disabled by some, or deformed in some way. Deuteronomy. An easy word to misspell, but I keep nailing it. I'm awesome. Exclusion from the assembly. No one who has been emasculated by crushing or cutting may enter the assembly, Lord. No one born of a forbidden marriage, nor any of their descendants may enter the assembly, Lord. This is basically what we would call in rude way a bastard. So this is basically anyone that wasn't born doesn't have his parents aren't married. So that's what we would call a bastard. So bastards can't enter the assembly of the Lord, even in the 10th generation. The 10th generation, that's pretty harsh. So it's very intolerant. God doesn't obviously love everyone, at least the author of the Torah, the God of the Torah doesn't. Here is a passage, and this is kind of disputed. When I was going through some research here, I was not aware of this passage, and I had to read it very carefully from the person that listed this as a criticism was saying. And I agree with him that it is saying what he thinks it's saying. So let's take a look here. But nothing that a person owns or devotes to the Lord, whether a human being or an animal or a family land, may be sold or redeemed, everything so devoted is most holy to the Lord. No person devoted to destruction may be ransomed. They are to be put to death. This is basically human sacrifice. Hebrew term means through an irrevocable giving over of things or persons to the Lord, often by totally destroying them. So according to this, you can promise to sacrifice a human being to God. And once you make that devotion, that person has to be killed. So this is human sacrifice. We talked earlier, I made a reference to this passage, but I didn't know the passage offhand. When Matt Slick tried to pass off the issue about slavery of foreigners by mentioning the passage where it talked about slavery of Hebrews, by saying that, well, Hebrews only had to serve 6 years and then they were free. So that was more like indented servitude. And I said, well, that's actually not true of foreigners, because actually what he was talking about in that passage were foreigners, foreign slaves. Foreign slaves don't serve 6 years and then go free. And this says what they do to foreign slaves. Your male and female slaves that are to come from the nations around you. From them you may buy slaves. You may also buy some of the temporary residents living among you and members of their clans born in your country. And they will become your property. You can bequeath them to your children as inherited property and make them slaves for life. But you must not rule over your fellow Israelites ruthlessly. So you can be horrible to them, but not horrible to your fellow Israelites. There is no restriction here on the slaves you get from other countries, except you just can't kill them. That was the only restriction given for that. They don't serve for 6 years and then you let them go. That's not what it says about foreign slaves. Here are some kind of stupid laws. Deuteronomy is kind of a threshold of really dumb laws. It's place where we find a lot of the really stupidest ideas in the Torah that people like to bring up when others mention that, well, the Bible's against homosexuality, and they will say, well, okay, well, the Bible's also against all these other things. Oh, I didn't spell it right that time. Deuteronomy. Oh my God. I was on such a roll spelling Deuteronomy right. That's why I'm totally fucked up. I'm a fucking loser. Deuteronomy 21:9-12, and you will have purged from yourselves the guilt of shedding innocent blood, since you have done what is right in the eyes of the Lord. When you go to war against your enemies, and the Lord your God delivers them into your hands, and you take captives, if you notice among the captives a beautiful woman and are attracted to her, you may take her as your wife. Bring her to your home and have her shave her head and trim her nails. That wasn't really a dumb passage. That was another slavery one. 23:9-11. No, let's not type the whole Deuteronomy again. I'm having bad luck with that. Only those wholly blessed by God can spell that word right every time they type it. I was not. I'm blessed. Deuteronomy 23:9-11. When you are camped against your enemies, keep away from everything impure. If one of your men is unclean because of a nocturnal emission, he has to go outside the camp and stay there. But as every evening approaches, he is to wash himself, and at sunset he may return to camp. This is what's called a wet dream, a nocturnal emission. If you do that, according to this, you gotta walk away from the camp and wash yourself ceremonially. Can't have any nocturnal emissions. Stupid law. Man marries a woman who becomes displeasing to him because he finds something indecent about her, and he writes her certificate of divorce, gives it to her, and sends her from his house. And after she leaves his house, she becomes the wife of another man, and her second husband dislikes her. She must be a horrible lay. Anyway, and writes her a certificate of divorce, gives it to her, and sends her from his house, or if he dies, then her first husband who divorced her is not to marry her again after she has been defiled. That will be detestable to the eyes of the Lord. Do not bring sin upon the land your Lord, on the land the Lord your God is giving you as an inheritance. I don't see why that's such an issue. If I married to a woman and we get a divorce and she marries another man and they get a divorce, I can't marry her again. It's only holy if she marries another man and I marry another woman. I can't marry her again. That's really fucking stupid. Doesn't make any sense. This is, again, I can't remember what these are about. I just put the links in there. 25, 11 through 12. Yeah, this is a funny one. If two men are fighting and the wife of one of them comes to rescue her husband from the assailant and she reaches out and seizes him by his private parts, you should cut off her hand, show her no pity. God, I hate it when that happens. I'm sitting here fighting a guy and my wife walks in and grabs my penis. God, it fucking pisses me off. No wonder they kill her. Some ridiculous behavior, bitch. These are some passages that imply Moses was not the author of the Torah. And we can make a pretty good case for this by citing a lot of stuff. But we're just going to go through passages that in themselves prove it. Abraham traveled through the land as far as the site of the great tree of Moreh at Shechem. At that time, the Canaanites were in the land. So this proves that Moses didn't write it. Because supposedly the whole book was written during Moses' life. And this is a reference that's saying in the future, at that time, the Canaanites were in the land. So it's a reference to this being a very long past event. The Canaanites were not driven for the land until I think the end of Joshua or mid-Joshua. So this shows that Moses didn't write this. Numbers 12, 1 through 3. I made some other case that Moses wasn't the author just for the fact that the name was made up. If you want to watch my better explanation of that, go to one of my previous videos, the one following the book of Genesis, where I make a pretty good case that Moses was not the author. No, actually, the one following the book of Exodus, where I go into that in more detail and essentially prove it that Moses was not the author of the Torah. The Torah was written in 700. I mean, it references all kinds of towns that didn't exist then. Moses' name is not Egyptian. If you want to hear about that, you can go to my previous videos. Numbers 12 through 3. Now Moses, this is a funny one. See, if Moses wrote this is a really funny passage. Now Moses was a very humble man, more humble than anyone else on the face of the earth. Imagine if he wrote that. If he wrote it, it's a self-contradicting statement. Like, let's pretend that I declared that I was the most humble person on the face of the earth. That would prove I'm not humble, since I think I'm more humble than, most humble person on the face of the earth. So that'd be a very self-contradicting statement if Moses had written that. I am the most humble person on the face of the earth. This is the end of the Torah, this passage here. Deuteronomy. Since then, no prophet. This is the very end of the whole Torah. And a lot of people will think that, well, this is something that Joshua wrote. But this passage actually shows that it wasn't even written by Joshua. It's written way later. Since then, no prophet has arisen like Israel, like Moses, whom the Lord knew face to face, who did all those signs and wonders the Lord sent him to do in Egypt, to Pharaoh and to all his officials and to his whole land. For no one has ever shown the mighty power, perform the awesome deeds that Moses did in the sight of all of Israel. So you know this is written way later, because they had to be a lot more prophets they're talking about here that Israelites had seen in their history. This wasn't written by Joshua. No one has ever shown the mighty power. I mean, you're talking about, you know, they're referencing the fact that Israel had a lot more prophets after this, because Moses would have been their first prophet, their first national prophet anyway. And so obviously it wasn't written anywhere near the time of Moses. Here's some passages that I bring these up a lot. These are some really good passages for disputing Christianity. And Jews will bring these up when they're debunking Christianity themselves to show that Jesus was not the Messiah, because the, what am I doing here? We'll just go to Deuteronomy 13. It's a very, very interesting thing you see here. What you're looking at here is the NIV. The NIV is a Christian Bible. So it has the Old Testament and the New Testament. It's a Bible read by Christians. Now look at the passage it begins. If a prophet or one foretells by dreams. Now, curious thing here. That is actually not the first verse in the Bibles used by Jews. You see, the chapter number system was not invented until about 1,000 years ago. Until then, the Torah was just this big long text. I mean, I think it had some page breaks. But other than that, it was just this big long text. They came up with the chapter number system later. And you could basically divide the line between one chapter and another, just the way you see it, or the way you see statements being connected with each other. And this choice of where to begin this passage here was very deliberate by Christians. Let's look at what a Jewish Bible does. This is an English translation of the Orthodox Jewish Bible. That wasn't the right one. No, that wasn't it. Maybe I'm not going to be able to find this here. I do know that the Jewish Bibles do not start there. Let's look at it. Try to find another Jewish translation. Well, anyway, in Jewish Bibles, what they do is that the end of chapter 12 in Jewish Bibles is the first verse of chapter 13. Yeah, here we go. We got a little thing here in the Jewish Bible. It gives a little 13:1, which is showing what that actually appears in Jewish Bibles. And we'll read it in the way this appears in a Jewish Bible. And you see if this applies to Jesus. 13:1. What things soever I command you, be shomer to do it. You know, the Jewish Bibles, this Orthodox Jewish Bible will show some Jewish words without translating them, because some of them are kind of up in the air, which makes it a good study tool. But anyway, what things soever I command you, be shomer to do it. Thou shalt not add thereto, or take away, or diminish from it, which Jesus did. Then it goes on. Very next thing it says, if there arise among you a Navi or a dreamer of dreams, and giveth thee an ot sign or a muffet wonder, and the ot sign or the wonder come to pass, whereof he spoke unto thee, saying, Let us go after Elohim Akirim, which means other gods, which thou hast not known, and let us serve them. Thou shalt not give heed unto this Devarin. It means magic or magician of that Navi, or that dreamer of dreams. For Eshim, this is God is testing you to know whether ye love God with all your life and all your heart. Ye shall walk after God and fear him and shower over him and obey his voice and shall serve him. And what you basically do, you're supposed to kill him. And this applies to Jesus pretty well, because even in the gospel account, Jesus is said to have done tricks, said prophecies that actually came to pass, and did miracles that actually worked. But what it's saying here is, even if someone does that and they actually perform miracles, you're still supposed to kill him. And so that's a pretty good command against somebody like Jesus. Applies to Jesus pretty well. And I hope you get my point here, that this passage, because Jesus added or diminished the law too. And if you take this in context of the part about the dreamer of dreams and shower of great works in the next passage, it's a pretty good command against Jesus Christ. If somebody shows that up like that, you're supposed to kill them. And Jews will rightly so bring that passage up when they criticize the Bible. Criticize Christianity anyway. Deuteronomy. Let me go back to the NIV. All these old Jewish words are going to make it hard for me to read this aloud. Not to say that that's not a very good study Bible if you want the Orthodox Jewish Bible, because it shows all those words and you can actually look them up if you're confused about what a passage is actually saying. So it's a very good study tool, that Bible, but it'd be a little difficult for me to read aloud because there's so many words there that I don't know. I always have trouble finding the NIV when I look at this list. There you go. Since then, no prophet has risen in Israel like Moses, whom the Lord knew face to face. Oh, I already read this in the previous little list, but it also applies to Jesus. No prophet has risen like Moses, who did all the signs and wonders the Lord sent him to do in Egypt. No, for no one has ever shown the mighty power to perform the offered awesome deeds that Moses did. Well, Christians think Jesus performed those kinds of miracles, performed better miracles than Moses. This is saying that Moses is a better miracle worker than Jesus, which is pretty anti-Christian if one thinks about it. Deuteronomy 18, 17 through 20. Unless there's another anti-Christian passage. The Lord said to me, what they say is good. I will raise up for them a prophet like you from among their fellow Israelites, and I will put my words in his mouth. He will tell them everything I command him. I myself will call to account anyone who does not listen to my words. And the prophet speaks in my name. But a prophet who presumes to speak in my name anything that I have not commanded, or a prophet who speaks in the name of other gods, is to be put to death. So basically, anything Jesus says, anyone like Jesus who comes along and says any kind of law or any kind of doctrine that is not contained in the Torah, you're supposed to kill him. Very anti-Christian. Again, exhibiting that the Torah is just not a Christian document. Not at all. People did not believe in Jesus and not believe anyone like Jesus. If someone guilty of a capital offense is put to death and their body is exposed on a pole, you must not leave the body hanging on the pole overnight. Be sure to bury it the same day, because anyone who is hung on a pole is under God's curse. You must not desecrate the land your God is giving you as an inheritance. You can apply this to Jesus being put on the cross, because he was left on it overnight. He was left on it for supposedly 3 days. And a lot of other translations will put that as, let's see what the King James Version says here. I always have trouble looking up these. I'm sorry for that sound there. That is my alarm telling me I need to get ready to go pick up my kid. And I might have to end this in a minute to go get him. King James Version. A man who have committed a sin worthy of death and he be put on to death, hang him on a tree. His body shall not remain at night upon the tree. So Jesus was on the cross for 3 days, according to the Gospels. And according to this, if you do that, he's accursed. We will get into the rest of this next time, and I will get into it right before I go into the book of Joshua in the carm.org website. And so I am a little sorry about being a little sloppy with this particular video. I had to kind of rocket through it because I got to go pick up my kid from school. He's having a half day today because it's finals week at school. My son's 16 years old. Hopefully he's doing well this finals, but I got to go get him. I mean, we actually live close enough to a school for him to walk, but with all the snow, just been a very snowy winter so far. And so we just got here in Michigan, as you can see. Well, out here it don't look so bad, but the path between here and school is just, the roads are, there's just a lot of snow built up and he has to kind of trudge through it to get to school. The school's not very far away, but he don't want to walk that distance, and that kind of, he gets all wet from the snow. But anyway, thanks for watching my video, and I apologize again for this video being a little sloppy, but hopefully you learned something through all my slurred words and my attempt to be as fast as I can to get out of here. And subscribe to my channel if you want to see more of this, whatever this is, and thanks for watching.